Centuries ago, amidst the fierce winds and rugged shores of Scandinavia, a legend was born, a man whose name would strike fear into the hearts of kings, and whose sons would carve empires from the bones of his enemies. This is the tale of Ragnar Lothbrok, a Viking chieftain who defied kingdoms, battled mythical beasts, and changed the course of history with sword and sail. Join us as we journey into the life of a hero whose saga still echoes through the ages. Today we are diving deep into this saga to separate fact from fiction. Let's start with the man himself. Ragnar Lothbrok. Was he even real? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. Ragnar's story is a fascinating blend of history, myth, and legend. Some say he was a farmer-turned-warrior, others call him a king. But the truth, it's shrouded in mystery. First, let's talk about the sources. The main tales of Ragnar come from the Icelandic sagas, written down centuries after his supposed exploits. These sagas are more like epic poems than historical records. They're filled with larger-than-life characters and fantastical events. So how much of it can we trust? One of the most famous tales is Ragnar's raid on Paris. According to legend, he sailed up the Seine River with a fleet of ships and laid siege to the city. The French king, Charles the Bald, supposedly paid him a massive ransom to leave. Sounds epic, right? But historical records from that time are sketchy. They do mention Viking raids on Paris. But was Ragnar really there? It's hard to say for sure. Then there's the story of Ragnar's death. Captured by the Northumbrian king Aella, Ragnar was thrown into a pit of snakes. As he lay dying, he uttered the famous words, "How the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers." This was supposedly a warning to his sons, who would later seek vengeance. But again, historical evidence is lacking. It's a gripping tale, but did it really happen? Ragnar's sons, though, are more firmly rooted in history. Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, Sigurd Snake in the Eye. These guys were real and made a significant impact. They led the great heathen army that invaded England in the 9th century. Their exploits are well documented in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, so even if Ragnar himself is a myth, his legacy lived on through his sons. But why does the myth of Ragnar Lothbrok endure? Part of it is the allure of the Viking Age, a time of exploration, conquest, and adventure. Ragnar embodies the Viking spirit, fearless and unstoppable. And let's be honest, his story makes for great entertainment. In recent years, Ragnar Lothbrok has enjoyed a resurgence in popular culture. Thanks to TV shows like Vikings, he's become a household name. But remember, these portrayals are heavily dramatized. They're inspired by the sagas, not historical fact. So, was Ragnar Lothbrok real? The answer is, maybe. He's likely a composite of several historical figures mixed with a hefty dose of myth. But whether he was real or not, his story continues to captivate us. That's it for today, mates. If you enjoyed this dive into Viking lore, hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. And let me know in the comments, do you think Ragnar Lothbrok was real or just a legend? Catch you next time. Imagine this. 120 Viking longships, carrying thousands of fierce warriors, sailing up the Seine River with one goal, to conquer the most powerful city in Francia. The year is 845, and Paris is about to face a siege unlike anything it has ever seen. But this isn't just a raid, this is a statement. A brutal display of Viking dominance that will send shockwaves across medieval Europe. The Frankish king, Charles the Bald, scrambles to defend his city, but can the walls of Paris hold back the Norse tide? Welcome to one of the most legendary battles of the Viking Age, the Siege of Paris. The Viking assault on Paris was no reckless charge. It was a calculated, methodical attack that tested the limits of both Viking ingenuity and Frankish resilience. The city was a fortress, protected by massive stone walls, guarded bridges, and the winding currents of the Seine. But the Vikings were relentless, and they had something their enemies feared: unmatched tenacity and a ruthless hunger for victory. The journey upriver was treacherous, but the Norse warriors pressed on, raiding and pillaging along the way, sending a clear message. Paris was next. When they finally reached the city, the defenders braced for impact. The first wave of the siege was brutal. Viking archers unleashed volleys of arrows, siege engines hurled fire, and warriors battered the gates with rams. But the Franks fought back fiercely, launching counterattacks, reinforcing their walls, and using the river itself as a weapon, blocking Viking ships and cutting off their reinforcements. The battle raged on for days. The Vikings tried everything, scaling ladders, burning the gates, even attempting to starve the defenders out. And just when it seemed like they might fail, they changed their strategy. Instead of brute force, they turned to fear. According to some accounts, the Viking leader, the infamous Ragnar Lothbrok, took a drastic step. He executed captured Frankish soldiers and hanged them from the trees along the riverbanks. It was psychological warfare at its most brutal. The message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. King Charles the Bold was left with an impossible choice. His city was on the brink of collapse, his army exhausted, and the Viking threat growing stronger by the day. With no other option, he did what many rulers before and after him would do. He paid the Vikings to leave. A ransom of 7,000 pounds of silver and gold was handed over, a staggering sum that would only embolden the Vikings further. Paris was spared, for now, but this siege would mark the beginning of many more Viking incursions into Frankish lands. The siege of Paris wasn't just a battle, it was a turning point. It proved that even the most fortified cities could fall to the Viking onslaught. It showed the world that these warriors were not just raiders, but military tacticians, capable of outmaneuvering even the most powerful kingdoms of their time. So what do you think? Did the Franks make the right call by paying off the Vikings? Or should they have fought to the bitter end? Let me know in the comments. And if you love stories of legendary battles and warriors, make sure to check out my other videos. This has been Legends Reimagined. See you in the next saga. 1,000 years before Columbus set sail, a Viking longship sliced through the icy waves of the North Atlantic, carrying a man whose name would echo through history. His destination, a mysterious land untouched by European hands. His name, Leif Erikson, the true first European to set foot on North American soil. But how much of his story is legend, and how much is truth? Leif Erikson wasn't just any Viking. He was the son of Eric the Red, the fierce Norseman who founded Greenland's first settlement. Adventure was in his blood. Born around 970 AD, Leif grew up in a world where survival meant braving the elements, mastering the seas, and carving out a place in lands unknown. But his greatest journey would take him beyond the edge of the known world, to a place he called Vinland. According to the Icelandic sagas, Eriksson set sail from Greenland with a crew of hardened Norsemen, guided only by the whispers of a sailor who claimed to have glimpsed land far to the west. What they found was unlike anything they had ever seen: lush forests, rolling meadows, and rivers teeming with fish. A land of abundance, rich in wild grapes, which gave it its legendary name. But the journey to Vinland was no triumph of destiny. It was a test of endurance. The North Atlantic was ruthless, its storms capable of swallowing ships whole. Icebergs lurked like specters in the mist. Every mile sailed was a gamble against death. Yet Leif and his crew pressed on, driven by a hunger for discovery. When they finally reached the shores of Vinland, they encountered not just a new land, but a new people. The sagas tell of uneasy interactions with the indigenous inhabitants, whom the Norse called Skraelings. Trade, conflict, and curiosity collided in a fragile balance. But unlike later European explorers, Leif Erikson's presence in the New World was not one of conquest. It was one of survival and understanding. How long did they stay? Historians debate the details, but one thing is certain. Leif and his crew built a settlement, explored the coastline, and left behind whispers of their presence. Whispers that would take nearly 1,000 years to be confirmed. In the 1960s, archaeologists uncovered Norse ruins at L'Anse Aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, proving that the Vikings did indeed reach North America centuries before Columbus. Yet for all his achievements, Leif Erikson's story remains shrouded in mystery. His exact route, his full encounters, and even the extent of his impact remain uncertain. The sagas blend history with legend, leaving us to piece together the truth from fragments of the past. But perhaps that is the nature of legends. They endure not because they are complete, but because they challenge us to seek the truth for ourselves. Leif Erikson's journey was more than an expedition. It was a reminder that history is not always what we think it is, that the first footprints on a distant shore may belong to someone history almost forgot. So, What do you think? Was Leif Erikson's voyage a fleeting adventure, or did it change the course of exploration forever? Let me know in the comments. And if you love uncovering the hidden stories of history, mythology, and literature, don't forget to subscribe. Because here at Legends Reimagined, the past is never truly lost.
Did you know that one of the fiercest Viking warriors to ever live was not a man, but a woman? Her name was Lagertha, a legendary shield maiden whose bravery and cunning on the battlefield earned her a place in the annals of Norse history. Lagertha's legend begins in Norway, where she was said to be the wife of the renowned Viking hero, Ragnar Lothbrok. When Ragnar's homeland was invaded by the King of Sweden, Lagertha did not shy away from battle. Disguising herself as a man, she fought alongside the warriors and emerged victorious. Her valor and skill in combat were so extraordinary that Ragnar himself was captivated. He sought her hand in marriage, but Lagertha, ever the independent spirit, tested his resolve by setting a ferocious bear and a savage dog to guard her home. Ragnar slew both beasts, proving his worth, and won Lagertha's heart. Though Lagertha became Ragnar's wife, her story did not end there. When Ragnar faced rebellion and sought to reclaim his throne, Lagertha led a fleet of ships and an army to aid him. In the heat of battle, it was Lagertha who turned the tide, charging fearlessly into the fray and securing victory for her husband. Lagertha's prowess in combat and strategic mind gained her the respect of her warriors and the fear of her enemies. She fought not for the glory of Ragnar, but for the honor of her people and her own legacy. When Ragnar's ambitions led him to cast her aside in pursuit of other alliances, Lagertha's spirit remained unbroken. Returning to her homeland, she rose to power as a queen in her own right. But her path to leadership was not without strife. When her second husband became cruel and oppressive, Lagertha took matters into her own hands, slaying him and seizing control of his kingdom. This act not only solidified her rule, but also sent a powerful message to all who doubted her strength. Her leadership was marked by justice and resilience. She protected her people from external threats and maintained order within her realm. Warriors and common folk alike revered her as both a fearsome shield maiden and a wise ruler. Lagertha ruled with wisdom and strength, protecting her people and expanding her domain. Her reputation spread far and wide, inspiring women and men alike to defy the constraints of their fate and embrace their own power. In her later years, Lagertha faced the challenge of defending her territory from encroaching enemies. Leading her forces into battle once more, she demonstrated that age had not dulled her skills or her courage. Her legend became one of resilience and defiance, challenging the very fabric of a society that often relegated women to the shadows. In the sagas, she is remembered not as a queen by marriage, but as a warrior who carved her own destiny with sword and shield. Lagertha's tale is one of courage, love, betrayal, and triumph. A woman who defied the odds, led armies, and ruled with strength and cunning, her story continues to inspire generations. But was Lagertha a historical figure, or merely a legend crafted by the sagas? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. What do you think? Could Lagertha have truly existed? Or is she the embodiment of the Viking spirit? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time as we continue to reimagine history's greatest legends. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep believing in the impossible.
He was exiled from 2 countries, carved a new world from frozen wilderness, and gave rise to a saga that would shape the course of Viking exploration forever. This is not just the tale of a warrior, It's the saga of Eric the Red, a man with flame in his hair, iron in his heart, and a legacy as untamed as the lands he conquered. Welcome to Legends Reimagined, where history's fiercest echoes come back to life. And today, we venture into the icy seas to uncover the remarkable life of the Viking who dared to defy the world. Erik Thorvaldsson, known to history as Eric the Red, was born around 950 CE in the rugged heartlands of Norway. But his story truly begins in blood. His father, Thorvald, was exiled for murder, a punishment that would echo in Eric's own life. Forced to leave Norway, the family fled west to Iceland, a land of volcanic fury and untamed coasts. Young Eric grew up with stories of honor, vengeance, and survival, Viking virtues passed like steel between generations. But those same values would one day bring him trouble of his own. Years later, Eric would follow in his father's footsteps, not just as a warrior, but as an outlaw. As an adult, Eric established his own farm in western Iceland. But in a world where steel often settled disputes, it wasn't long before tensions turned deadly. A quarrel with a neighbor led to Eric's slaves damaging property. Retaliation followed. And then came bloodshed. Eric drew his blade and killed, not once but several times, triggering a full-blown feud. Icelandic law demanded justice. Eric was outlawed for 3 years. Banished from the island, he had a choice: fade into the fjords or carve a path into the unknown. But Eric wasn't made to hide. He was made to explore. Eric sailed west, guided by tales of a distant land sighted by Norse adventurers. What he found was harsh, desolate, and shrouded in ice. But Eric saw something else: opportunity. He named the land Greenland, hoping the pleasant name would lure settlers. It was a stroke of marketing genius in the Viking Age, and it worked. When his exile ended, he returned to Iceland, rallied families and farmers, and led them back across the seas. They braved monstrous waves, freezing winds, and weeks of uncertainty. Of the 25 ships that set out, only 14 arrived. Yet out of that hardship, a new Viking colony was born, etched into the icy soil of Greenland and into legend. Eric the Red never returned to Norway. He didn't conquer empires or rule vast kingdoms, but he did something just as powerful. He expanded the Viking world. His Greenland settlement endured for centuries, and through his son, Leif Erikson, he laid the foundations for the Norse discovery of North America, nearly 500 years before Columbus ever set sail. But Eric himself would never see the shores of Vinland. When Leif invited him to join the expedition west, Eric declined, an omen, he believed, after falling from his horse. Perhaps the gods were calling him home. Soon after, the fiery-haired outlaw turned pioneer would fade into the northern mists. Eric the Red's life was a tempest, marked by exile, blood, and relentless ambition. He didn't just survive banishment, he turned it into a saga. His story reminds us that legends aren't always born in palaces or battlefields. Sometimes they rise in the frozen unknown, shaped by those bold enough to defy the cold, and history itself. So tell us, was Eric a brutal outlaw or a visionary explorer? Drop your thoughts below. And if you love stories where history and myth collide, like and subscribe to Legends Reimagined. Until next time, may your sails be full and your legend eternal. Did you know that the last stand of the Vikings against Christianity wasn't just a battle of swords and shields, but a war of beliefs that reshaped Scandinavia forever? Imagine a world where mighty Norse warriors, once devoted to Odin and Thor, were forced to kneel before the Christian cross. How did this epic clash of faiths unfold? And what really happened in those final days of Viking paganism? Welcome to Legends Reimagined, where we uncover the hidden stories of history, mythology, and literature. Today, we're diving into the dramatic struggle between the Vikings and the rising tide of Christianity, an epic conflict that would change the fate of an entire civilization. For centuries, the Vikings thrived under their old gods, fierce, independent, and bound by honor to the deities of their ancestors. But with the spread of Christianity across Europe, their world was about to face its greatest challenge yet. Christian missionaries arrived with promises of salvation, while Christian rulers sought to expand their influence. The Vikings stood at a crossroads: cling to their ancient ways or embrace the new faith that was sweeping through their lands. This conflict wasn't just a religious one, it was a battle for identity. For the Norse, their gods were more than just figures of worship. They were woven into their daily lives, their laws, and their sense of honor. Christianity, with its structured hierarchy and strict moral codes, was a stark contrast to the free-spirited and warrior-driven Norse way of life. The tension simmered for years, leading to a series of power struggles that would define the future of Scandinavia. As Viking leaders wrestled with the decision to convert, political motivations often played a crucial role. Some saw Christianity as a means to gain favor with powerful European kingdoms, securing alliances and trade routes that would benefit their people. Others, however, saw the new faith as a threat to their traditions and fought fiercely to resist it. One of the most significant turning points came with King Harald Bluetooth of Denmark, who converted to Christianity around 965 AD. His decision wasn't purely spiritual. By adopting Christianity, he secured stronger ties with the Holy Roman Empire and legitimized his rule. But not everyone was willing to follow his lead. Many Viking chieftains resisted, leading to bitter internal conflicts that pitted brother against brother and kingdom against kingdom. The resistance reached its peak with figures like Olaf Tryggvason, the fiery Norwegian king who wielded Christianity as a weapon to unify his realm. His aggressive conversion tactics, including the destruction of pagan temples and forced baptisms, fueled resentment among those who refused to abandon their ancestral gods. But despite their defiance, the tide of change was unstoppable. Pagan strongholds crumbled one by one, and the once feared Viking warriors found themselves trading their axes for crosses. Even Iceland, one of the last bastions of Viking paganism, eventually yielded in the year 1000 AD, when their leaders made the pragmatic decision to adopt Christianity to avoid conflict with their powerful neighbors. But while the old gods faded from public worship, they never truly disappeared. To this day, traces of Viking beliefs remain deeply embedded in Scandinavian culture, from folklore to traditions that have survived for generations. In the end, the Viking resistance against Christianity wasn't a single dramatic battle, but a slow and inevitable transformation. Some fought until the bitter end, refusing to bow to the new faith, while others embraced it, seeing an opportunity for unity and progress. The legacy of this struggle still echoes through history, reminding us of the power of belief and the resilience of tradition. So what do you think? Were the Vikings right to resist Christianity, or was their conversion an inevitable step in their evolution? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into Viking history, be sure to subscribe to Legends Reimagined for more deep dives into the myths, legends, and forgotten stories of the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey there, history buffs! Today I'm diving deep into one of the most intense battles in Viking history, the final stand of the Norse warriors. Grab your helmets and swords, because this is going to be epic. Picture this. The year is 1066. The once mighty Viking Age is coming to an end. Our story takes us to the Battle of Stamford Bridge in England. You see, the Viking leader Harald Hardrada, known as the Hard Ruler, had set his sights on the English throne. He wasn't just some random guy with a dream. He was a seasoned warrior with a force of around 10,000 battle-hardened Norsemen. But the English were ready. King Harold Godwinson, a tough and savvy ruler, had just finished battling another rival in the south. With his army exhausted but determined, he marched north at breakneck speed to confront the invaders. Imagine the surprise on the Vikings' faces when the English appeared on the horizon so quickly. The battle kicked off on September 25th. The Vikings, caught off guard and with many of their men not even in armor, fought fiercely. They formed a shield wall, a classic Viking defense tactic. The English, however, used their superior numbers and tactics to break through. There's this legendary moment when a lone Viking warrior stood on the bridge, holding off the entire English army for hours. He single-handedly delayed them, chopping down anyone who dared to cross. It's said he killed around 40 men before being taken down himself. Talk about heroic last stands. Despite their bravery, the Vikings couldn't hold out forever. Hardrada was struck by an arrow to the throat, and his forces crumbled. By the end of the day, thousands of Norse warriors lay dead. This battle marked the end of the Viking Age. The dream of a Viking-controlled England died on that bridge. So, why does this battle matter? It wasn't just a clash of armies, it was the end of an era. The fall of the Vikings marked the rise of new powers and the beginning of modern Europe. It's a stark reminder of how quickly empires can rise and fall. That's all for today's deep dive into Viking history. If you enjoyed this epic tale, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more historical adventures. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the present.
The Vikings were not just raiders, they were settlers, merchants, and explorers. Their legacy still echoes through time. Ever wondered why the Viking invasions had such a lasting impact on Britain? Let's dive into the historical depths to uncover the lasting legacy of these Norse warriors. First, let's set the scene. The Viking Age, spanning from the late 8th to the early 11th century, saw Norse seafarers from Scandinavia exploring, trading, and yes, raiding across Europe. Britain's unique position made it a prime target. But it wasn't just about the raids. Vikings established settlements, integrated with local populations, and influenced the culture, language, and politics of the time. One of the most significant impacts was on the English language. Many Old Norse words were integrated into Old English. Words like sky, egg, leg, and even anger have Viking roots. This linguistic blending has evolved into the modern English we speak today. Politically, the Vikings left an indelible mark. The establishment of the Danelaw, a region of England under Danish control, reshaped the political landscape. This area stretched from London to Northumbria, and its influence persisted even after the Vikings relinquished control. The legal systems also saw Viking influence. The concept of trial by jury has roots in Viking practices, where community members would decide on matters of justice. Then there's the cultural impact. Viking myths and legends intertwined with local folklore, enriching Britain's story tapestry. The Norse pantheon of gods, with tales of Odin, Thor, and Loki, found new homes in British tales and traditions. Trade routes established by the Vikings boosted economic growth. They introduced new goods, technologies, and ideas. Their advanced shipbuilding techniques influenced British maritime practices for centuries to come. But it wasn't all positive. The invasions brought destruction and upheaval. Monasteries, often targeted by Viking raids, were centers of learning and culture. Their loss was a significant blow to the preservation of knowledge. Despite the chaos, the Viking invasions ultimately led to a more fortified and unified England. The need to defend against these formidable invaders spurred the development of more robust defenses and military strategies. In conclusion, the Viking invasions left a multifaceted legacy on Britain. From language and law to culture and commerce, the Norse influence is woven into the very fabric of British history. Next time you hear the word sky, remember the Vikings who helped shape the world as we know it. Thanks for joining me on this historical journey. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more fascinating tales from the past. Until next time, keep exploring history.